First Nation Awaswas people cared for the land and environment around Santa Cruz for many thousands of years before the Spanish mission period. Today, their descendants, the Amamutsan, are teaching proper stewardship to the newcomers. And here before the humans were the four-legged creatures of the sea, air, land, and plants and rocks. As our industrial economy has now developed the power to destroy life, the continued existence of all these are in our hands. So tonight, in just a minute, we're going to be putting in the chat box some links to some documents. At the end of the meeting, well, we're going to go through all the propositions in numerical order with 3 minutes for a pro statement and 3 minutes for a con statement, and then we'll have a chance for a few questions. If you want to pose a question, please put that in the chat box. And Chris Krohn is going to be watching the chat box, and he will present the questions to our speakers. So we have about 10 minutes for each proposition. And at the very end of the evening, the Santa Cruz for Bernie members are going to vote. And what I wanted to do right now is let's see. I'm going to do a screen share just so so people understand how just to get an idea of how the voting is going to work.
Excuse me, Jeffrey, we have 3 phone numbers. Do we want to have those folks identify themselves?
Yeah, okay, I'll get to that in a second. I'm just showing here this is the voting form, and Chris is gonna put the link to this voting form in the chat in just a minute. And what we have here is, you can see the timestamp email and first name and last name of people who are voting, and there's nobody in there at this point. And then we have a place to vote yes or no on every one of the propositions. So Chris, in a moment, put the link to this voting form in the chat box, and you may go to that voting form at any time during this meeting and vote. If you already know how you want to vote, go ahead and vote. After each presentation of a proposition, I think I'm going to try to show the straw poll tally at that point. And then at the end of the meeting, what I'm going to do is just check to make sure everybody who's voted is actually Santa Cruz for Bernie member, and we'll announce the end of voting, and then we can come up with the final tally on the votes. Okay, so that's all happening later on. The other document that Chris will link in the chat box is the agenda for tonight, which also has some links to other resources like Ballotpedia, if you wanted to do your own research, and also shows a chart of what other organizations have done with these endorsements. We definitely don't want you to make your decision on voting tonight based on other organizations, but it just does help sometimes to know what other people are thinking as one more piece of information. Okay, so Chris, you can go ahead and put those items in the chat box. Thank you. Looks like you just did. Okay, we are on a tight timeline.
Jeffrey, should I be letting people in from the waiting room?
Yes, and what I'm going to do is change the settings so we get rid of that waiting room. Okay, so I don't think we're going to have anybody else in the waiting room. Everybody will be just, thank you for reminding me of that. Okay. Let's see where we are. Okay, so if you have any questions about the process tonight, also please submit those questions through the chat, and Chris will be watching the chat and he'll bring up any issues. The chat is set up so that you can only send your comments to the hosts. Okay. So we're at, wow, it's 6:14, and I think I want to get back to the agenda and start with our first speaker. And we're going to start with Prop 14. And we have, let's see, we have Pete Shanks, who's going to be speaking opposing Prop 14. And what I'm going to do, okay, because generally we hope to get a speaker pro and con on each issue, and we didn't do that. So what I'm going to do is fill in a little bit with comments that I have researched to give you some oversight on the other positions. So I'm going to start with a pro statement on Prop 14, and Pete will follow me a con statement. And if you are looking at the gallery view, you will scroll in the gallery view and you will see Brett Garrett's window, and he's got a time, he's our timer, and he's got the time showing. So he's going to start at 3 minutes in each one of those. Right now it says Santa Cruz for Bernie timer. Okay, and okay, well, he started it. Mine's not going to take 3 minutes, so I'll just get started. Oh, and just so you know, you're not going to know if what I'm saying is my personal view or just the results of my research as a participant in the debate. So anyway, yes on Prop 14, stem cell research. Robert Klein has been a longtime advocate for stem cell research. He says, this medical revolution holds the promise of restoring health and quality of life for many Californian individuals and families suffering from chronic disease and injury. Klein is the chairman of Californians for STEM Research, Treatment, and Cures. He was the chief author of Proposition 71 in 2004 and leader of the campaign behind Prop 71. And once it passed, he was the first chairperson of the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, an organization that was established by Prop 71. Which was established to spend the $3 billion in bonds raised at that time. In 2004, pro-life advocates tried to shut down stem cell research nationwide, so Prop 71 was California's way of validating science. Now Klein says, quote, the last tactical mile to bring this broad spectrum of therapies to patients will require more funding and the thoughtful support of California's public as the human trials and discoveries are refined and tested. Klein and his Klein Financial Corporation are the primary proponents of Prop 14, providing $4.6 million of the $6.6 million contributed to the Prop 14 campaign. Can't you just appreciate this man's selfless dedication to the welfare of others? Vote yes on Prop 14. Okay, that's the end of the pro statement, and so you can, Brett, you can go back to 3 minutes, and Pete, are you on? And
I'm ready to go.
All right, go ahead.
You can hear me.
We can hear you.
There we go. Bob Klein had a son who suffered from juvenile diabetes, who has since passed away, I'm afraid, and at the time had this hope that stem cell research would lead to a cure. It hasn't so far. It hasn't actually led to any cures, really. And they promised them back in 2004. I've got 6 bullet points. We can't afford it. Conditions have changed since 2004. The whole thing is based on hype. It's anti-democratic. It's a giveaway to insurance companies. And it's a giveaway to big academia. The universities have made a fortune. Stanford, for example, has had more money than anyone else out of the previous proposition. On the money, you all know about the budget deficit. We're still going to be paying for the 2004 proposition until 2040. We'll be paying for this one until 2050. And constitutionally, those have to be paid before things like firefighter salaries. Time's fast. Things have changed since 2004. Nowadays, the feds are funding stem cell research. The NIH funded it to the extent of 2.1 billion this year. So that argument that might have been reasonable in 2004 has gone away. Also, embryonic stem cells are not even the point anymore because people have learned, scientists have learned how to transform ordinary cells into stem cells. Things have changed. On the height thing, after 16 years, the FDA has approved 2 therapies based on that investment. It's not a very good payback. If it was a good payback, private money would be in there. Both 2004 and now are set up essentially to prevent oversight from electeds in Sacramento. They require supermajorities to do anything. Interestingly, Jeff Sheehy, an AIDS activist who's on the board of CERM, California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, from the very beginning, has refused to endorse the second proposition because it does not improve these governance issues. It does have money for the insurance companies because these therapies are liable to be extremely expensive. And let's give away to big academia, and I've reached 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, Pete. So now the floor is open for questions. And if you have any questions for Pete, I probably would not be able to answer any questions, but it looks like the question doesn't Klein stand to make money on this? Well, it seems to be his employment.
Not really. Seriously, he got into it because of his kid. I'm completely sure of that. And Klein knows Sacramento. He's a multi-millionaire from building affordable housing. Now, I don't think anyone should be a multi-billionaire from building affordable housing. But hey, but this one, no, I don't think he's going to make money.
Right, okay.
I don't see any other questions.
Can I put a reference out then?
Sure.
You might want to look at Google as California Stem Cell Report. It's a pretty objective blog that's been going since 2005, and there's a lot of information on it. Just Google search California Stem Cell Research. And I might also mention San Jose Mercury came out with a really strong editorial against Prop 14.
Yeah. Okay. 5, 6, 2. Okay, I'm going to unmute. I'm going to unmute Glenn Glazer because he's on the phone and he can't see. He can't put a message in.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great.
Yeah.
So
Do you
Pete,
want a
have you ever
verbal time
done-
warning since you cannot see?
I'm sorry?
It's just you have a quick question on the stem cell issue?
Yeah. I'm curious if Pete has ever engaged in academic research,
Have I?
like at the graduate level.
No, not really. I have actually been working on stem cell issues since about 2000, but I do not have formal credentials of that kind. I'm a consultant with the Center for Genetics and Society in Berkeley and have been all along.
Okay. All right, well, I think we're ready to move on to the next one, to the next issue. So I just want to, and at this point, no one has entered any votes in the endorsement poll. If you use the endorsement form, the voting form, you log on, you can submit your vote, and then you have the option to go back and amend it. So if you wanted to just keep currently going back and amending after each proposition discussion, you can do that. Or you could just wait till the end. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on here to Proposition 15. And John Katz is going to present for 3 minutes. And John, are you unmuted? I can't remember where you are. Okay. Okay, John, I'm asking you to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you just
Okay,
fine.
thanks.
So can you see Brett's timer? You got 3 minutes.
Yeah, I can see his timer. 3 minutes. Okay. All right, thanks. Thanks, Jeff. I'm John Katz, and I both live here in Santa Cruz, but I was a founding member of the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club. And our club has taken on Prop 13 reform almost from its beginning, 20 years ago. Prop 13, as many of you know, puts a real blanket around the amount of property taxes that can be raised in California for schools and communities. And basically, since it started, Prop 13 was in effect, the public sphere in California has seriously deteriorated. I mean, schools used to be among the best funded and most respected anywhere in the country. Today, we're at the bottom of the list. Many local governments are also feeling tremendous pinch, particularly in this time of COVID and shrinking budgets. And there have been sort of little chips away at that, these regressive taxes that try to be put on to try to make up some of the difference. But basically, California school districts and California public districts, cities and counties and special districts have lost a huge amount of money through Prop 13 they should have had. And what Prop 15 tries to do is change that, reverse it in a very progressive way. And basically what it says is that homeowners and residential property and small commercial property can keep the same rates as they do under Prop 13. But what would happen would be larger commercial property over $3 million, mostly big business, think places like Disneyland and Google and Apple, will start having to pay more their fair share of property taxes to schools and districts and local government. So that's what Prop 15 does. Basically, it takes off the cap that's there now from Prop 13, which is 1% a year and 2% increase each year, and basically says, let's bring it up to the current assessed value. If it was sold tomorrow, what would be the value, the cost of that property? Right now, a lot of big businesses hang on to their property, at least in terms of their legal title, for years when they otherwise get out functionally, just so they don't have to be reassessed and pay more property taxes. What Prop 15 does is says you can't do that anymore. Basically, we'll start assessing your commercial property at its current value. That will raise considerable amounts of more money for schools and local districts. Like in Santa Cruz County, it would raise about $25 million more per year for schools, another $22 million for local districts, cities, counties. It would also raise about $4 million a year more for Cabrillo College and every other community college around in California. So that's what it does. And we think it's a progressive approach. It doesn't increase taxes on residential property renters or homeowners or small business or farmers. It just raises property taxes mostly on big business, again, like Disneyland or Google or Apple or et cetera. So that's what it does. And we think it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and pretty good.
Well, thank you so much, John. I'm going to make statements on the other side. No on Prop 15. Keep Prop 13. John Kupal, president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, said, "This is yet another attack on the long-standing taxpayer protections in Prop 13. Special interests continue to push for new and higher taxes to pay for their out-of-control pensions, which have already directed existing tax revenues away from classrooms and other state priorities." Tom Campbell, State Director of Finance from 2005 and to 2006, said, "In repealing Prop 13 for businesses, California will be forfeiting our best argument to attract new jobs, a long-term sacrifice that will hollow out California's economy." Ted Gaines, Republican member of the California State Board of Equalization, said, "California is blessed with some of the world's best farmland, but is cursed by some of the worst public policy. Prop 15 would only make it harder and more expensive for agriculture to flourish in our state." The Orange County Register editorial board said, "Proposition 15 does not raise residential property taxes, but if voters signal that Prop 13 no longer is sacrosanct, it might not be long before tax hike supporters come after those protections too. Consider yourself warned. Vote no on Prop 15. Okay, so that's the end of the statements. We have, the line is now open for questions. Let's see, okay. There is a question from Chris Crone in the chat. "Is it true this proposition does not go far enough? How much will the public actually see in the public school coffers?" John,
I
can you pick
try
that?
to answer that up. I just looked it up for Santa Cruz County alone, and that's per year when this gets implemented, which would be in a couple of years if it passes. The Santa Cruz public schools get about $22 to $23 million more per year, divided among the schools on a per student basis. And local districts, counties, cities, counties get about the same per year, every year from going forward. So that's the benefits in dollars terms.
Okay.
And whether that's far enough or not is a whole other question. But right now, that's what the initiative says.
Okay. Another question from Len. How does the small business threshold get figured? Is it adjusted for inflation over time? You're the expert, John. If you know it.
Well, I'm not totally the expert on this, but I think everything in California tax law, including this proposition, basically gets adjusted each year a certain amount. Not necessarily for inflation, but the current laws, everything gets increased by about 2% based on current law. Now, whether that threshold changes in the initiative, I believe it does. Right now, it's at roughly $3 million value. It does go up based on inflation. So the threshold where small business is taxed versus not taxed moves up with inflation. I believe. I have to double check that, but I believe that's the case.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. So
There's blue hands raised.
Could I say one more quick thing?
yeah,
Jeffrey?
Go ahead, John.
Just one more quick thing. I just want to say, Prop 15 is supported by Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, to give you an idea of the breadth of the support.
Right, right. So Len's hands up, but Len made a comment in the chat. And Mark Lee put his hand up, but we're taking the questions by chat. Are you able to put your question in the chat, Mark? So another question from Len. Who does the appraisal of commercial and industrial property? Is property reappraised each year? What's the basis? Does the appraising authority use the same methods as commercial appraisers? You know that one, John?
That's a question mostly for the county assessor, but it would change based on what Prop 15 says, the language, based on the conditions I think it's every third year, something like that, if not every year. I'd have to double check that, but it's based what the assessor in your local county does, their process would stay in place. It's just they have to do this more often than they would normally.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we got to the end of the questions. I didn't see a question come in from Mark. So we're going to move on because I think the time is up anyway. So we're moving on to Prop 16 on affirmative action, and Bruce Van Allen, you are up to speak in favor of Prop 16. I think you're unmuted.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I think can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Well, thanks, everybody. So Prop 16 is a constitutional amendment for the state of California that removes an amendment passed as Prop 209 back in 1996, which banned the use of affirmative action by California government, including education. And almost immediately, enrollment by Black and Latinx students and hiring of faculty up in the University of California and the California State Universities, and similar effects where the tool of affirmative action wasn't available anymore, immediately had effects and led to the continuation of the disparities and inequalities in our society instead of seeking to remove them. I was honored a few weeks ago when the County Board of Education that I serve on passed a resolution in favor of Prop 16 to repeal Prop 209. And I want to read a little bit from that resolution which the board adopted unanimously. Root causes of the uneven prosperity within U.S. society include the theft of land and suppression of the culture of indigenous peoples, the enslavement of many thousands of families from Africa, the legal and extra-legal suppression of Black political power post-slavery, I lost my place, the subjugation and exploitation of immigrants from around the world, intersecting with the denial of rights and dignity based on race, ethnicity, and national origin. U.S. society suffers from the living legacy of patriarchal misogyny, characterized by denial of personal agency, right to freely associate, and economic independence for girls and women, along with homophobia and transphobia, restricting the freedom for all persons, as reinforced by patriarchy. Institutional racism is reinforced through ideologies of white supremacy and American exceptionalism and a lot of other things, and I'm running out of time. So let me just jump to civil rights legislation alone and not remove racism from our society. Claims about affirmative action against it often say it's about lowering standards. And what I want to say is, no, actually, it's about raising our standards for what we want from our society. So I urge everyone to vote yes on Prop 16. Let's get California back on a positive track. It's not the only thing we have to do, obviously, but it's one important step along the way, and we should remove this constitutional inhibition of progress that's in our state right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Okay, I'm going to fill in on the other side. No on Prop 16, block affirmative action. Former US Republican Tom Campbell said, if more spaces are to be made for the underrepresented, they must come from the overrepresented. Asian Americans are 15% of Californians, yet 40% of UC enrollees. Those numbers are why bringing this issue forward now would inevitably divide Californians racially. Latino Americans and African Americans on one side and Asian Americans on the other side. The politics are inescapably racial. Wenyuan Wu, Director of Administration for the Asian American Coalition for Education, said, built on partial evidence and shallow prescription for an unrealistic utopia, Prop 16 is in essence divisive and discriminatory. Its overarching goal is to undo Prop 209, a bill that won popular vote in 1996 and has withstood legal scrutiny over time. It is misguided in that this proposition proposes instant but wrong solutions to persistent social ills. Republican Assemblyman Stephen Choi of District 68 said, repealing Prop 209 is to repeal a prohibition of judgment based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, and national origin. We are talking about legalizing racism and sexism. Michelle Steele, chairwoman of the Orange County Board of Supervisors, said, Prop 209 applied to California the essence of Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of a nation where individuals would be judged by not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And finally, former US Rep. Republican Darrell Issa said, who served as co-chairperson for the campaign behind Prop 209, said, the fact is Prop 209 has worked. The minority graduation rate has risen under this. Okay, so we're ready for any questions on that. And let's see. Okay, I do see now, Mark, you put in a couple of questions about the previous Prop 15. I don't see any questions about Prop 16. So, John Katz, you still on the line?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to read you. We're going to go back and take Mark's questions just because I think try to be fair here. What will be the financial impacts of increased property taxes on businesses leaving the state to more property tax neutral states such as the southern part of the country? Do you know anything about that?
Well, you know, if a business is so directly affected by a modest increase in their taxes, they decide to leave, to some extent, they might leave. But I think they also want to be in a state that has better schools, better public services, all the things that Prop 15 would deliver. And they're going to have to make that judgment. The increases in property taxes aren't that drastic for most businesses that it would really affect that kind of decision. But that's partly up to them. There's a real trade-off, though, for the people between better public services and schools and the taxes on some businesses, mostly bigger businesses. This does not affect small businesses or homeowners or renters or anybody else directly.
Right, right. And do you know of any studies that have been conducted to assess the impact of businesses closing and laying off working people in California?
Well, right now, businesses are laying people off for all kinds of other reasons.
Right.
Not directly related to Prop 15, which hasn't taken place. So it's a very complicated thing. I don't know about studies per se on the effect of this initiative. I'm sure the Chamber of Commerce will come up with some phony study that says, you know, this is terrible,
Right.
but you can't quite believe that.
Right. Okay, well, thank you, John, for filling in on more information on Prop 15. I don't see any more questions, so I'd like to move on to Prop 17. And Stacy Falls is going to speak on that. And I think I located Stacy Falls, and I want to unmute you. Okay.
Hey.
So, Stacy, are you on now?
I am, and I'm here using the Zoom, but then I'm gonna go back to my phone because I still don't have internet, and I'm trying to save my data plan.
Okay.
Okay, so so to me, Proposition 17 just seems really obvious. So I will tell you from Ballotpedia what sort of the overview of it is, because I think like kind of knowing how straightforward it is really helpful. So it's basically a constitutional amendment that would allow people who are on parole for a felony conviction the ability to vote in California. So
Join the meeting.
Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
Okay. So right now, the California Constitution actually prevents people who have felony convictions from voting while they're imprisoned and while they're still on parole. So this ballot measure, like in my opinion, it doesn't go far enough. Like ideally, I think that we would allow folks to be able to vote even if they're in prison, but at least this is the first step to re-enfranchising folks. There's actually, so some states are even stricter than we are. Some states actually disqualify people for the rest of their life if they've been convicted of a felony. You know, and so California, though, like not letting people vote until they're done with both their time and their parole is pretty strict, which, like, in a democracy, to me, just seems unconscionable, right? Voting is one of the most basic and essential ways that members of a democracy can participate in that democracy. And I think, like, you know, the point of living in a democracy is that we should actually be able to learn from our mistakes. And I don't think that people should be barred from participating in the democracy because they have at some point in their life made a mistake, even if the mistake was big enough to warrant being charged and convicted with a felony, especially when we consider the fact that, like, people make felony level mistakes all the time, but our criminal justice system disproportionately goes after poor people and people of color, meaning that our Constitution is systematically preventing some of the most oppressed members of our community from participating in the democratic process. And so if we acknowledge that systematic racism and systematic classism exist in our criminal justice system, then, you know, we should be acknowledging that it's really clear that folks who have been convicted of crimes have just been failed by the system. And so they should be able to confront and correct the system through voting. That's the point of voting. Just, I mean, like, as Santa Cruz for Burners, like, just even reading the arguments against Proposition 17 from Ballotpedia are so racist and full of fear-mongering. The argument that I read said, let's talk a little bit about the universe we're dealing with here. They include murderers, voluntary manslaughter, rape, and sodomists. For those that commit the crimes, particularly the heinous crimes, part of their sentence is to complete the parole period. And I just think, like, we should be fighting that kind of ugly rhetoric and acknowledging that, you know, we're not talking about the worst of the worst. We're talking about people who have been caught in a really bad system, a really racist system, and a really classist system, and we should work to overturn that.
Right. Thank you, Stacy. That was a very good presentation. And you pretty much covered all of the arguments or any of the statements that I was going to say on the other side. So I think you kind of covered both sides. So anyone have any questions on Prop 17? Okay, seeing none, move on to Prop 18, which would allow 18-year-olds, excuse me, would allow, it's Prop 18, would allow 17-year-olds to vote in primaries and special elections if they would turn 18 by the subsequent general election. And we don't have any speakers lined up for or against. So I'm just going to say, I don't know, I guess it's not really fair. I have some comments opposing the youth vote, but since we don't have anyone speaking for it, I think I'm just going to skip that, unless anyone really wants to hear what's wrong with granting 17-year-olds to vote. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? Right. let's see, Glenn Glazier was going to make the presentation when we get to Prop 24 in favor of it, and he's having trouble connecting. So I would ask if anybody feels competent to talk about Prop 24, please let us know in the chat and you'll have a chance to speak on it. Let's see. Okay, there was a question on Prop 18 from Randa saying, go ahead and state why you oppose 18. Well, I'm not, okay, this is not necessarily my personal opinion, but I'm just, all right, I'll read the San Jose Mercury News editorial of August 13th opposing the youth vote. It's been nearly half a century since the ratification in 1971 of the 26th Amendment to the US Constitution, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. It made good sense. Until then, American men could be drafted into the military at age 18, but they had to be 21 to cast a ballot. Now there's a fledgling national movement to lower the voting age to 16. California's Prop 18 is a step in that direction. It would allow 17-year-olds to vote in primary or special election before the general election when they would be 18. The argument for another lowering of the voting age is not as compelling as it was for the 26th Amendment. While 18 demarks an age when most young people complete high school and head out on their own to college to enter the job world or to join the military, most 17-year-olds are still in high school and reliant on their parents for support. Most concerning, 17-year-olds have little or no experience paying the taxes that they will be asked to vote on or balancing budgets like the public officials they would help elect. There's no clear age of maturity, but 18 is a rational point to mark the entry into adulthood. Indeed, in some areas, 18 is on the low end. When it comes to purchasing alcohol in California, the age has remained 21. And state lawmakers in 2016 raised the age for purchasing tobacco from 18 to 21. In 2019, the federal government did the same for the nation. It doesn't make sense now to lower the voting age to 17. Vote no on Prop 18. So anyway, that's the San Jose Mercury News position. Okay. Let's see where are we? Okay. Pauline Seals offers to make a brief statement in favor of Prop 18. And so let me find you, Pauline. And okay, I'm trying to unmute you, Pauline. Are you there? Oh, wait, wrong one. Pauline, here we go. Try this one. Have I got you, Pauline?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so maybe
a lot of the young people today are super aware of how seriously we have fucked up the world. Excuse me, but there's nothing else I can state that doesn't say it as explicitly as that. Climate, plastics, the divide between rich and poor, and everything else. It is so bad. The kids get it. They're going to have to inherit this world. Give them the vote.
Okay. Thank you, Pauline. That was a very concise statement.
Stacy Falls.
I think a lot of people can appreciate. Okay. All right. So
join the meeting.
All right. So that was Prop 18. Now moving on to Prop 19. Property tax law, and Len Bea is going to make a statement in favor of Prop 19. And let me find you, Len. Make sure that you're unmuted. Oops.
I think I'm unmuted.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
Great. Thank you. I'm Len B.A. Proposition 19 has 3 key provisions. One that is a good reason to vote for it, one that's pretty neutral in my opinion, and one that's really a pretty good reason to vote against it. As you may know, Proposition 13, which passed in 1978, limits reassessments of property for tax purposes to the time of sale. In 1986, Proposition 58 passed that amended Prop 13 so that children could inherit property from their parents or grandparents and it would not be reassessed. However, this applied to all property, including rental property and any other type of income property. The same year, Proposition 60 also passed, which allowed persons 55 or older, people with permanent disabilities, and those who lose their homes due to natural disasters, which we've just seen happen here in Santa Cruz County, to carry over the assessment of their existing property to a smaller or equal home in the same county, or to other California counties that opted in to the program. But currently only 10 of California's 58 counties have said they will allow someone to do essentially an exchange of assessment into their counties from another county. The intent of this was to allow older residents or people who lost their homes in a disaster or people who were on permanent disability to downsize without paying a tax penalty or to replace a home damaged in a fire or other disaster. But this opportunity was limited in Prop 60 to once in a lifetime only. So Prop 19 changes a few things. First, it limits the reassessment exemption upon inheritance to primary residences and operating farms only. And it also reassesses on the property value that exceeds the current assessment plus $1 million. Adjusted, and starting in 2023, that'll be adjusted for inflation. That alone, I believe, is a really good reason to vote for Proposition 19. Second, Proposition 19 expands the elderly, disabled, and displaced reassessment exemption to make the exemption available up to 3 times in one lifetime, and takes away county discretion on that inter-county relocation. In other words, it makes it apply to relocations anywhere within the state. It also allows such individuals to buy a larger property, which seems to me kind of contrary to the whole intent of that, but it allows them to buy a larger property, but it does reappraise based on the difference in value at the current price. So in other words, if you sold your old house for $600,000 and you bought a new one at $800,000, even though the original one was only appraised at $200,000, you still got to add $200,000, the current additional difference. That, I think, is a reason to vote against the proposition, though to me it's not a super strong reason. Some argue that this exemption for exchanging essentially appraisals into another property increases competition for lower cost homes, but I think that's a really minuscule impact, not a very strong argument. And the under construction of more affordable housing is an issue that needs to be addressed directly, not on the nickel and dime margins of things like this. And third, the legislative analyst predicts that additional revenues over time from this measure, which would result solely from this removing of income property from the inheritance exemption, going to local governments, school districts, and the state in the amount of tens of millions each in the first few years, and eventually growing to some hundreds of millions of dollars. That additional revenue, that when it goes to the state, the portion that goes to the state, is earmarked by Prop 19 only for fire prevention and firefighting. To me, that earmarking seems like, you know, just a political move. It's kind of capricious and silly in my mind, and might be another reason to oppose the measure. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Len. I really appreciate your even-handed approach there, saying what was good and what was bad about it. And I was going to read a San Jose Mercury editorial again opposing Prop 19, which kind of made the same points as yours, saying that there was at least one really good reason closing one loophole, but they were really bad-mouthing this proposition for opening up other loopholes and also panning the pandering to the state's firefighters union in an attempt to broaden support. I would just add, follow the money. The real estate industry spent $13 million on Prop 5 in 2018 for a similar measure to fiddle with the these property tax adjustments, and that measure failed. That was 13 million 2 years ago, and this time the real estate industry has kicked in 19 million, and also tried to draw in firefighters union. So, you know, who's to benefit? You know, who's going to be hurt? Who's going to benefit? I think it. Personally, if the real estate industry is that invested in it, I'm going to question it a lot. Okay, so are there okay, so are there any questions? I don't see any questions in the chat about Prop 19. It's a pretty complicated thing.
I have one question, Jeffrey.
Sure.
Somebody asked, as a teacher whose salary depends on property taxes, this feels like it undermines schools. Am I misreading it?
Len, can you?
No, it would actually add revenue. It would increase revenue. And the reason it increases revenue is because it takes away that reassessment exemption for transfer of property that is not a primary residence. So in other words, if somebody inherits an apartment building or a commercial block or or a shopping mall, they would no longer be exempt from reappraisal of that property. And that's why it would actually add to revenues. But it's not a big add. I mean, as they said, it's tens of millions in the first few years, which on the statewide basis is not a lot. It would eventually be some hundreds of millions as, you know, properties continue to change hands or people die. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, in a state where $1 billion spread out over the state doesn't go that far, hundreds of millions is not nothing, but it might not be enough to persuade you that it's worth the flaws you find in this very mixed piece of proposition.
Okay, thank you so much, Len. I think we will move on to Prop 20. Stacy Falls has agreed to speak against Prop 20. So I'm going to give you the opinion on yes on 20. Yes on 20, tough on crime. Assembly Bill 109, a California law adopted in 2011, and Props 47 in 2014 and Prop 57 in 2016 were all designed to reduce California prison population, which was deemed overcrowded by the US Supreme Court. In the rush to accommodate the SCOTUS ruling, these laws went overboard in reducing penalties, downgrading felonies to misdemeanors, and letting felons out on parole too soon. Prop 20 reins in these soft on crime imbalances. We all know that you've got to be tough when dealing with the criminal mind. A key proponent of Prop 20, Democratic Assemblyman Jim Cooper of Assembly District 9 said, right now, California crimes that are considered non-serious and non-violent and that allow you to get out of jail or prison earlier are drugging and raping somebody, raping a developmentally disabled person, spousal abuse, a drive-by shooting, human trafficking of a child. So a myriad of different crimes, some 17 to be exact. The public never had any idea. These were not considered serious or violent crimes in the state of California. When they hear it, they're shocked. Vote yes on Prop 20. Okay, Stacy, are you still unmuted? Let's see, where are you, Stacy? Okay, I'm trying to unmute you, Stacy.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Can hear you just fine.
Great. So I feel like my argument against Prop 20 is not that different than my argument for Prop 17, which is just, again, that I think we need to acknowledge that the criminal justice system has some major problems of racism and classism. And, you know, 2020 has been a tough year, but at least it's getting out in the open that that the criminal justice system really disproportionately affects people who have been marginalized by our society in so many ways. And so, you know, this idea that, you know, we need to get tough on crime and the only way to make sure that people don't commit crimes is to have really serious punishments, just empirically is not true. You know, and so I'm not an expert on things like, you know, felony theft versus misdemeanor theft, but I used to volunteer in prisons, and I've done a lot of work around fighting the death penalty in my home state of Michigan. And just over and over again, what we saw was the empirical evidence that like the states that executed people the most also had really high rates of crime. And you would think that like if a really serious punishment prevented people from doing crimes, that the most executing states would actually have the lowest crime. And it just is consistently not true, because the reason people commit crimes is because they've been let down by the system, because they are poor, because they are people of color. So for instance, like Prop 57, one of the things it did was that it reclassified certain types of theft from being felonies to misdemeanors, right? And there was a dollar amount that was put in place. So for instance, at the time, like if somebody stole an iPhone, that was a felony level crime. But it's clearly like a crime born out of poverty, you know, and so because of Prop 57, it was that kind of a crime was lowered to a misdemeanor, and everybody freaked out and said, oh my gosh, we're going to have all kinds of crime running amok. But in fact, both Proposition 47 and 57 and AB 109 were really effective in reducing the prison population without having like a huge spike in crime that everybody promised was going to happen. So just looking at the racist classist system that we have in place, I think we need some serious criminal justice reform and reinstating really serious draconian punishments is not the way to do that.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Very good statement. I'm looking for questions. I don't see any questions in the chat on this Prop 20. So I think I want to move on to Prop 21, rent control. And Len Bay, you may still be, it looks like you're still unmuted, and you can go ahead, 3 minutes on why we should vote for Prop 21.
All right, well, Proposition 21 would replace the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995 with new regulations about local rent control. It does not create rent control, it simply loosens the limitations on local governments that choose to implement rent control. It makes 3 key changes. Instead of limiting rent control only to multi-family buildings built prior to 1995, which is the current restriction on rent control in any municipality, Prop 21 enables municipalities to regulate rents on any residential building that is more than 15 years old. In other words, as of the effective date, if it were to pass, that would be anything built before 2006. including single-family homes, duplexes, condominiums, and apartments. And of course, as time goes on, that would add.
Join the meeting.
Proposition 21 adds an exemption from rent control for landlords who own no more than 2 properties. And of course, local jurisdictions can make any exemptions they want beyond that, but they can't override that. These are limitations on local rent control. Instead of preventing local governments from restricting rent increases upon a change of tenancy, Proposition 21 allows jurisdictions to carry forward rental price restrictions, except that they may not prevent landlords from increasing rent upon a new tenancy by up to 15% over the first 3 years of that new tenancy. Essentially what they're doing is saying, oh, instead of no cap on new tenancy, you can now set 15% or higher cap. Existing municipal rent control ordinances already allow annual rental cost increases, usually limited to around 2% per year, with exemptions for, in some cases, recovering the cost of improvements to a property. The cost of improvement thing is not spelled out in Prop 21, which I think is unfortunate, but they've left that up to local government. Prop 21 requires that rent control ordinances allow landlords a fair rate of return. That's something already established in jurisprudence, but it's not encoded in state law yet. And this seems to me like an enormous loophole. If a property is sold and the new owner takes on a lot of debt to buy that property, that debt can be passed on to the tenants to get this fair rate of return. It seems that rent control should be used as a tool to keep housing prices in check. And this does not quite do that, but overall it's a good thing. I think, you know, I'd love to add more, but I'm out of time, so I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you so much, Lynn. So I'm going to give an argument no on 21, no on rent control. Lack of affordable housing is a crisis in California. Prop 21 is proposed to fix that problem, but high rents in California are due to a shortage in the housing supply. We simply haven't built homes fast enough to keep up with population growth. As a result, more people are competing for a limited number of dwellings. Sid Lacaretti, president of the California Retail Housing Association, said, "It's been proven time and again that rent control does not work." Thomas Aiello, policy and government affairs manager for the National Taxpayers Union, said, "If approved, it will hurt renters by discouraging private sector builders from bringing more affordable housing units to the market." The major building trades unions oppose Prop 21 because they know it will stifle housing construction. Gary Passmore, president of the Congress of California Seniors, said, "Prop 21 provides no protections for seniors and would hurt senior renters and homeowners alike. For those seniors relying on their single-family home for their retirement nest eggs or to help fund their care later in life, Prop 21 pulls the rug out from under them. And for senior renters on fixed incomes, Prop 21 would result in less affordable rental housing options." Tom Bannon, CEO of the California Apartment Association, who opposed Prop 10 in 2018, said, "Voters overwhelmingly rejected the measure the last time it was on the ballot. Once we educate voters about this latest housing freeze measure, it's bound to fail, just as miserably as Prop 10. So that's that.
Jeffrey,
yeah,
can I rebut just very quickly? I just want to say that all these claims, like that it reduces the number of rental units available, that it actually raises the cost of housing, there's no statistical evidence. You'll notice in all of those quotes and all of the arguments in the ballot pamphlet, there's not a single statistic cited. And the reason is because the statistics actually show that rent control works. It doesn't work for the entire population, but it really does work for a significant portion of those people who have to rent. And there are statistics to prove that.
okay. Thank you, Len. I was hoping somebody'd say that. Not wanting to show off my bias or anything, but okay. Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add too. This is not, this is not creating rent control. It's just allowing cities and counties to use this tool when they see fit. And to me, that seems not only reasonable, but the only truly democratic thing to do.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat about rent control. So then we could go on to Prop 22, which is about AB5, gig economy. And I couldn't find any speakers for or against that. So I'm going to make a couple of statements. First one in favor of Prop 22, and then one opposed to Prop 22. And then we'll see if that generates any questions. Or there might be some experts in the crowd here. Yes on Prop 22, repeal AB 5. Prop 22 provides an exemption from AB 5, Assembly Bill 5, for app-based drivers. While these drivers would not be covered by labor law as it applies to employees, Prop 22 provides a robust set of benefits and protections for these workers. The Orange County Register editorial board says, AB 5's backers, primarily labor unions and their advocates in the Capitol, are upset that big technology companies can essentially bypass the state's inflexible labor rules, the product of a bygone era when the factory floor and office cubicles were the dominant workplaces. Supporters are trying to use government to hold back inexorable economic changes. Because of the law's deleterious effects on many industries, including our own newspaper publishing, this editorial board has called for the total repeal of AB 5. We don't like legislation by exemption. Nevertheless, the more exemptions to this legislation monstrosity, the better. Real jobs and services are at risk. Vote yes on Prop 22. And then switching hats, no on Prop 22. Preserve Assembly Bill 5. AB 5 was intended to end exploitation of a broad array of workers who were misclassified as independent contractors in the gig economy, simply so companies could avoid their responsibility and cost of worker benefits and protections. A number of industries have complained about AB 5, including publishers regarding freelance journalists and newspaper delivery carriers. AB 5 may need some tweaks, but the law clearly captured its primary targets, Uber and Lyft. So Prop 22 would hollow out the main thrust of the law. Rideshare companies have amassed $110 million, a 50-to-1 advantage over the opposition. Art Pulaski, chief officer of the California Labor Federation, said, "This measure is another brazen attempt by some of the richest corporations in California to avoid playing by the same rules as other law-abiding companies in our state. These CEOs spin this ballot measure as a benefit to workers, but their corporate Hail Mary falls short. It steals protections and pay their employees are entitled to under current law." In a book called Rigging the Gig, researchers with the Partnership for Working Families and the National Employment Law Project wrote, "The benefits contained in the initiative pale in comparison to what workers are entitled to under state law." Okay, so that's some pro and con arguments on Prop 22. And let's see, Bruce Van Allen has a comment on Prop 22. And Bruce, if you can go ahead, let me unmute you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. You know, I live part of my life in the tech industry world, and it's really common knowledge that what Uber and Lyft and some similar companies are up to is a scam on workers and our broader society. They are losing money rapidly. They have billions of dollars of venture capital invested, but they're losing money every day, every month, every year on a large scale. And what they're doing, and this is, I think, fairly common knowledge, I hear it a lot in the tech world, they're waiting for automatic, self-driving vehicles, and they want to put the worker out of the picture. And what they're doing is, until that comes about, which may be several years or more, until it's conceivably safe to have automatic, self-driving cars and delivery vehicles and things like that, that's going to be a while. But what they're doing is counting on exploiting low-wage workers who end up with about $2 an hour for a typical Lyft driver or an Uber driver these days. They've undercut the taxi industry, and they're just taking advantage of those workers, not until someday it's all going to flourish and those workers will actually be well compensated, but no, until they're actually obsolete out of the picture. So to me, this is just an example of taking advantage of the idea that somebody could be an independent contractor. I'm an independent contractor in a lot of my work. It's not the same as having where the only way you get to do some kind of work is to have some company call you up and tell you, okay, there's a ride down on 3rd Street, get down there first, and you get it, and then you get this little fee. It's just utter exploitation. Everybody in the tech industry knows where Uber and Lyft are trying to go, and it's recognized as a huge investor scam. So I'm against Prop 22.
Thank you, Bruce. And I think everybody who's looking at the chat might have seen Chris Crone's comments about taking the same position as Bruce. So he's taking advantage of his role as a co-host to be able to send out a text to everybody, but you can't do that. You can only send it to the hosts. Okay, seeing no more questions about Prop 22, I'd like to move on to Prop 23. And unfortunately, I had somebody lined up from SEIU United Healthcare Workers. Maybe Terry Sandoval is here. She was going to join at 7:30. Oh, she's going to join at 7:30 to speak in favor of Prop 23. So I'm going to, let me see if she's here yet. I don't believe so. Okay, so when she joins, she had another obligation. So when she joins at 7:30 or thereafter, I will call on her, and then we'll come back to Prop 23. So, Prop 24, let's see. Prop 24, Glenn Glazer was going to make his statement on this. He lives in Ben Lomond and had to move, and his life is kind of in upheaval at this point, and he was on briefly earlier tonight, but doesn't seem to be able to get back on. So I think I'm going to postpone that one until a little later. And see if he can come back on, which leads us to Prop 25. And just hold on here a second, and I'm going to respond to Terry Sandoval. So
NBA.
Join the meeting.
okay, Prop 25, which is ending cash bail. And I'm going to make a statement in favor of it, and Stacy is going to through some refutation or some concerns about Prop 25. Okay, so Prop 25. Okay, yes on Prop 25, end cash bail. Cash bail is a tool to ensure the presence of the defendant before the court. The defendants with sufficient resources now can post the bail amount, which they get back upon showing up for their court case. Defendants with less resources may pay a bail bond firm 10% of the bail amount so they can stay out of jail before their court date. They lose that premium even if they are found innocent. Indigent defendants spend the time in jail awaiting their court appearance. Estimates of 1/3 to 1/2 of all people in local jails have not been convicted of anything and are just awaiting trial, at great cost to local government, by the way. If they are found innocent, they get no compensation for their time in jail, which may have caused them to lose a job or housing or strain a relationship. This is an egregiously unjust system that perpetuates class oppression. In 2018, the California legislature passed Senate Bill 10 to replace cash bail with a system that considers public safety and flight risk through an assessment system to be established by the superior courts. ACLU chapters in the state opposed SB 10, saying that it was not explicit enough in assuring that the new assessment system would be designed to avoid perpetuation of the implicit bias inherent in our entire criminal justice system, but they would not support overturning SB 10. The bail bond industry spent millions to mount a veto referendum to overturn SB 10, which put Prop 25 on the ballot. The strongest argument to overturn SB 10 is to keep the lucrative bail bond industry in business at the expense of poor people, largely people of color. As a legislative bill, SB 10 can be amended to assure a fair assessment system. Let's take the first step toward fairness by ending cash bail. Vote yes on Prop 25 to end cash bail and keep AB 10 in place. I just want to mention this one, the wording is a little backwards. Yes means keeping the ban on cash bail, and no is reinstating cash bail. Okay, Stacy, are you on? Are you still muted? Stacy, I've got to unmute you. So, Stacy, you with us?
Yeah, so I now have internet, but it's a little glitchy. So I turned my video off to save some bandwidth. Can you still hear me, or am I really glitchy?
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay.
I see you too.
So this one I feel really conflicted about, and I feel conflicted about it because of what Jeffrey mentioned about the ACLU being opposed to SB 10. And so I am a member, I'm the vice chair of the local chapter of the ACLU of Northern California. And I'm just saying that I'm not speaking for the ACLU right now, but because I am on the board of the local ACLU, I paid attention to SB 10, which was a bill that initially the ACLU supported. And by the time, you know, all the negotiations had happened between the AB and the SB, the thing that ended up getting voted on was actually something like the ACLU went from supporting it to being neutral on it to just outright opposing it. And so my instinct is to, like, cash bail is bad, and I think we should get rid of cash bail, which is a no vote. Right? Am I right, Jeffrey? I'm right? Getting rid of cash bail is no.
Oh, that's yes. Yes.
Right. Oh my God. Okay, so I think we should get rid of cash bail, which means yes. However, I'm not convinced that SB 10 is the way to get rid of cash bail, but I think the problem is that like voting no on this will be perceived as supporting cash bail. Like, there is no way to vote and say, I want to end cash bail and I want to end it in a way that's different than SB 10, right? And so we're left with voting no to repeal SB 10 or voting yes to keep SB 10 in place, and voting against SB 10 is going to be perceived the same way as voting for cash bail. And so I feel really conflicted about it, and obviously have not gotten myself clear on which is yes and which is no. But I think ultimately I agree with Jeffrey, but it just feels like a really like confusing proposition that requires maybe some nuanced thought.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any questions on cash bail on Prop 25? So one question: why did the ACLU oppose? I think Stacy addressed that, which was just that some people assume that the assessment system that would be set up instead of cash bail, the flight risk and so forth, would be done by a computer algorithm that would most likely be biased, just like everything else in our society. And the people who are now harmed by cash bail would still be targeted, or would be implicitly targeted and feel the more brunt of the assessment process. And so nobody's worked out, I think a lot of people are in agreement that let's get rid of cash bail, but nobody's come up with a good system to replace it yet.
And I can read the statement from the ACLU of Southern California if that's at all interesting.
Sure.
So they say, after further serious consideration, the ACLU of California has changed its position on the recently amended SB 10 to oppose. As much as we would welcome an end to the predatory lending practices of the for-profit bail industry, SB 10 cannot promise a system with a substantial reduction in pretrial detention. Neither can SB 10 provide sufficient due process nor adequately protect against racial biases and disparities that permeate our justice system. Unfortunately, this amended version of SB 10 is not the model for pretrial justice and racial equity that the ACLU of California envisioned, worked for, and remains determined to achieve. We oppose the bill because it seeks to replace the current deeply flawed system with an overly broad presumption of preventative detention. This falls short of critical bail reform goals and compromises our fundamental values of due process and racial justice.
Right. Thank you. Question come up. I don't understand why we need a proposition to support an existing law. The reason we need a proposition to support an existing law is because the bail bond industry put in a whole lot of money to, what's the term? They mounted a veto referendum, is exactly what this proposition is. It's a veto referendum. So if the state legislature passes a law and somebody doesn't like it, they can get enough signatures to take that law to the vote of the people, and that's what they did in this case. So a yes vote confirms the action of the legislature. No vote vetoes that legislation. Okay. And the question, how does SB 10 differ from this proposition? Oh, it's the same thing. It's either vote yes, keep Senate Bill 10 with its flaws, or vote no and veto Senate Bill 10. So it's not changing Senate Bill 10 at all. It's either yes, yes, keep it, or no, get rid of it, and go back to the old categories. Okay. Right. Okay. I'm Terry Sandoval has joined us. Are you with us, Terry?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you just fine. So we're going to be moving back to proposition, what are we talking about? 23, right, proposition 23. And so you've missed out on, I know you had other business. So you're going to get 3 minutes to make a pitch, a statement in favor of Prop 23. And then we don't have a speaker against, but I'm going to read some research that I've found of arguments opposing Prop 23. So you probably know all the arguments against. So if you can address those before I speak, then people will get a good picture of it. So are you ready to jump in?
Yes, I'm ready. I hope I could get through this in 3 minutes or less.
Okay.
We're looking for a yes vote on Proposition 23. Dialysis is a dangerous but life-saving procedure in which a patient's blood is taken out, cleaned, and then put back into their body. More and more people have underlying diseases like hypertension, coronavirus, or diabetes that can lead to kidney problems, and the chances you or someone you love will need dialysis is growing in California. Dialysis must be done 3 times a week, each session lasting 3 to 4 hours. For people with end-stage renal disease, the vast majority of those are on dialysis. It must be done for the rest of their lives or until they get a kidney transplant. We need stricter hygiene and sanitation protection. Patients have reported seeing dead flies, live cockroaches, and human bloodstains at the dialysis clinics where they receive treatment. When dialysis treatment areas are not properly sanitized between patients, they can be exposed to infections and diseases like COVID-19, hepatitis, tuberculosis. The public has a right to know about sanitary conditions and infections at clinics where they or their family members are receiving dialysis. Staffing. Dialysis treatment is often run out of strip malls by people working for barely minimum wage who are pressured to maximize profits by rushing treatment of dozens of patients at once. This initiative will ensure that there's a doctor or advanced practice nurse on site and provide basic patient protections. It's also about equality. If you live in a wealthier neighborhood, maybe your dialysis looks like the shiny ones in the ads that the dialysis industry will broadcast all over TV to defeat our measure. But if you're poor or in a rural area or a Black or brown community, you're less likely to receive quality care at your clinic. There's 4 major planks of the initiative. First one is it will require a physician or nurse practitioner to be in the clinic anytime patients are being treated. Number 2, the clinics must report accurate data on infections to the state and federal government. Number 3, like all other life-saving healthcare facilities, clinics cannot be closed or reduce services unless approved by the state. This is designed to protect patients in rural communities or those who have had to travel long distances if their clinic is closed just so the dialysis company can pad its bottom line. Number 4, in the final plank, is it prohibits clinics from discriminating against patients because of the type of insurance that they have. So they would not be allowed to refuse someone who is on Medicare or Medi-Cal because of the rates, the reimbursement rates that they will receive. And it prohibits them from only taking those folks that have like Cadillac insurance policies. Thank you, I got it in.
Okay. Thank you so much, Terry. So I'm going to read part of a San Jose Mercury News editorial from August 18th. Just as they did 2 years ago, leaders of a large labor union are trying to use a statewide election to go after the kidney dialysis industry. California voters saw through the political blackmail by the Service Employees International Union in 2018, when 60% of voters rejected Prop 8, a misguided effort to regulate the industry. Now they should turn down Prop 23. Which would require each dialysis clinic to have a physician on site while patients are treated. The dialysis industry has successfully rebuffed efforts to unionize dialysis workers and increase staffing ratios at clinics. Prop 23 is the union's latest harassment designed to force the industry into submission. Requiring on-site physicians sounds good on the surface, but we already have a shortage of kidney doctors in California and throughout the United States. The vast majority of the dialysis clinics in the state would be forced to hire doctors with no expertise in the specialty field, adding hundreds of millions of dollars to the cost for little or no medical gain. Not even doctors who stand to financially benefit from the measure are supporting it. The California Medical Association, Alameda Contra Costa Medical Association, the San Mateo Medical Association, and more than 25 other medical groups throughout the
Jeffrey, I think you're frozen.
Stop it. Stop it.
While we wait for Jeffrey to unfreeze, I'd like to share with you all that back in 2016, dialysis workers in Southern California came to SEI United Healthcare Workers West and asked for help to organize because of the working conditions that they have. They often work 12 to 14 hours a day without overtime. They're receiving barely $15 an hour to do this type of work. Yes, we would like to organize, but we did not seek them out. They came to UHW asking for help to organize. Yes, the dialysis industry will pour in at least $100 million to defeat this ballot measure. They took us out. They got 60% of the vote in 2018. We got 40%. They spent, like I said, they spent somewhere between $100 and $150 million to fight us. When the dialysis shareholders met with DaVita and Fresenius, they said it was going to cost us $100 to $150 million every 2 years to fight them. What does labor peace look like? How much does labor peace look like? And then they came up with the numbers, and it's far less than what they're paying to defeat us. The dialysis industry, they're very well funded, and they have paid a lot of people to oppose us. One of the most glaring is Alice Huffman, who is the president of the statewide California NAACP. They have Alex Rooker on their payroll, who is a very high-standing leader with the California Democratic Party. They have Willie Pelote fighting against us. They're able to get different hospitals and chambers of commerce to come against us. To me, it just seems ridiculous. Like, why would you not want to have a doctor or nurse practitioner present when you are having this type of a procedure? It's a very invasive procedure. You could miss one and you lose, your chances of surviving just falls down exponentially. Because it's very, very important that this treatment is done. There has been talk. I'm going to pull it up really quick because my vision is not great. They're talking about what the measure, the financial impact will be. This is coming from Attorney General Xavier Becerra. He says increased state and local health costs likely in the low $10 million annually, resulting in increased dialysis treatment costs. Essentially, that gets absorbed by the insurance industry, and then absorbed by you all, because for those of you that are paying for private insurance, it takes 33,000 insurance customers to offset the cost of one dialysis patient per year. You're looking at anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 per year of what the dialysis patient, what the dialysis industry is charging. Sorry, Jeffrey, you were frozen for a bit, so I just took advantage. You're now on mute.
Is Jeffrey logged on? Does anybody know?
Yeah, no, I'm back on.
Oh, thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
back on. I lost my connection briefly. So before I was lost, did you hear some of the San Jose Mercury editorial that I was reading? Did that come through?
You got as
about
far,
2 minutes of it.
you got as far as Alameda County and Contra Costa County.
That was it. That was it. That's all I said. Okay. Great. Great. Okay. All right. Let's see. So let's see. There's a question here in the chat. Great. Prop 23 and dialysis from Anne. My mate was under dialysis for 5 years, so I know it well. The reforms are necessary. Many die due to lax rules. Okay, well, that was not really a question, but it was a pretty powerful statement. Thank you, Anne, for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for acknowledging the fact that, you know, it's not a great lifestyle of being on dialysis 3 to 4 times per week. And it's usually 4 hours, 3 hours at minimum. You know, and, you know, the dialysis patients, they're wiped out after they receive the dialysis, and they have 1 day to rest, and then they go back the next day. So, you know, the dialysis is very near and dear to my heart. I have a cousin who's on dialysis, and they keep refusing to put her on the kidney donation list, because what happens is if you get a kidney donation, then you're no longer a consumer of theirs, because you no longer will need dialysis. So they'll oftentimes play games and just say, well, why would you want a kidney transplant? Because don't you love your family here? Don't you want to spend the rest of your life receiving dialysis with your family? And my cousin's just like, no, I don't want to receive dialysis anymore. I want to, you know, live a better life for her children. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Terry, for making the effort to join the call.
Thank you, Brother Smedberg. I really appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah, and Terry is an organizer with SEIU United Healthcare United Healthcare Union, United Healthcare Workers, which is been promoting this proposition. Okay, so I think we covered them all except for Prop 24, which is about consumer privacy laws. And as I mentioned, Glenn Glazer was not able to join us for this. And so I'm going to say a few things on each side of this one. He is in a tech industry which apparently does work worldwide, and in terms of privacy, they are using a standard that is common in Europe. It's the standard of privacy in Europe, and he really supports that. He thinks it's really good, and he thinks that the Proposition 24 will essentially put in place that that European standard. I'm not sure of the details because this is a very complicated proposition. It's 2 pages long, and I doubt if anybody in the group has read it. Has anyone read it? Yeah, after our Prop 24 discussion, We have John Laird on the line, and I will ask him I will unmute him and see if he has any comments on any of these propositions, because he often leads workshops on propositions. So on consumer privacy, I'm again going to quote from the San Jose Mercury News editorial of August 16th, which took a position against Prop 24. So unfortunately, all I can say in favor of it is that Glenn Glazer supports it, and he works in the industry that uses the privacy features. So the Mercury News article says California's new online privacy legislation just took effect on January 1st. The Attorney General's office didn't announce that it had received approval of its final regulations for the law until this month, but that didn't stop advocates from trying to update the law by qualifying an initiative. The state law, which was passed by the legislature in 2018, was widely regarded as one of the toughest in the nation. Of course, that's not comparing it to Europe. California needs more time to evaluate it before attempting to deal with any perceived problems. And if improvements are needed, they should first try the legislative process before taking a 52-page ballot measure to the voters. Sacramento's legislative sausage-making process for crafting laws isn't pretty, but at least it allows for some discussions of strengths and weaknesses of proposed legislation. This measure has consumer groups with years of privacy expertise divided. The ACLU, the Consumer Federation of California, and the Media Alliance oppose Prop 24. Consumer Watchdog backs it, while Consumer Reports is neutral. One feature of Prop 24 is that it would allow the legislature to approve an amendment. So this is interesting, because one of the difficulties with propositions is the legislature doesn't have any effect on it. But this would allow legislature to approve an amendment with simple majority vote. With this caveat, the law should be amended if necessary to improve its operation, provided that the amendments do not compromise or weaken consumer privacy while giving attention to the impact on business and innovation. Wow, how much attention needs to be given to the impact on business and innovation? Does it mean that a law strengthening consumer privacy is illegal if it negatively impacts business? To what degree? Bring on the lawyers. Just as troubling, Prop 24's opt-out language allows businesses to collect consumers' data unless users change settings on their devices. It should be just the opposite. Business should only collect data on users that opt in by affirmatively granting permission. Consumer advocates have long held that privacy should be the default approach. Finally, Prop 24 would allow companies to charge higher prices to consumers who choose to protect their privacy. If it needs change, the legislature should have a chance to fix any flaws before taking on before taking a ballot measure to the people. Vote no on Prop 24. I wish Glenn were here to refute all those statements. Does anyone have any questions or comments on Prop 24? And at this point, I'm going to, and questions wouldn't really be in order because I'm no expert and I couldn't answer